Lavrov calls Macron's remarks about his intention to speak with Putin pathetic diplomacy, Russian army general shot in Moscow, and how Belgorod left without power, water and heading after missile attack. The latest news next. In Moscow, an unknown assailant carried out an attempted assassination of Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev, first deputy head of Russia's main intelligence directorate. Alexeyev has been taken to hospital, reported by Kremlin-aligned Russian news outlets RIA Novosti and TASS. According to Russian media, the attack took place in a residential building on Volokholamsk highway in northwest Moscow. The attacker reportedly shot Alexeyev several times in the back before fleeing the scene. Russia's investigative committee confirmed that a criminal case has been opened over the attempted assassination and that the suspect is being sought. No information has been released about the condition of the wounded official. For reference, Alexeyev, who holds the rank of lieutenant general, has been first deputy head of the main intelligence directorate since 2011. Vladimir Alexeyev was born on the 24th of April 1961 in the village of Holodki, Khmelnytsky district, Vinnytsia region, Ukraine. He graduated in 1984 from the Vasily Margelov Ryazan Higher Airborne Command School in Russia. Over the years, he served as head of intelligence directorates in the Moscow and Far Eastern military districts, later headed the 14th Directorate of the GRU, and in 2011 became first deputy head of the GRU. According to Ukrainian authorities and international investigative reports, Alexeyev was responsible for intelligence support of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the preparation of targeting data for missile and bomb strikes on Ukrainian territory, particularly civilian facilities, as well as activities related to organizing sham referendums in temporarily occupied territories. Open sources have also cited his role in attempts to establish quasi-authority structures in occupied areas, particularly in Kherson region. In 2017, according to Russian state media, Alexeyev was awarded the title Hero of Russia by a classified presidential decree. Late in the evening on February 5th, the Russian city of Belgorod was hit by a missile attack. Following the strike, power heating and water outages began in the region, according to Russian Telegram channels. According to information from public channels, the missile strike occurred at around 10:55 p.m. Witnesses reported 5 impacts on the territory of a local substation. According to the Telegram channel Popil Belgorod, the Frzenskaya substation in the village of Dragunskaya, Belgorod district, which had already been targeted by unknown drones, was allegedly hit. Later, the channel also reported that the missiles were heading toward the Belgorod thermal power plant. Local Telegram channels reported that after the missile strikes, parts of Belgorod lost electricity, heating problems began, and even television stopped working. In the comments, Russian users complained that outages of electricity, heating and water had begun across the region. Authorities have not yet made any official comments. Blocking Starlink will force Russian forces to reduce the pace of strikes on Ukrainian logistics. This will be felt most by Russian units in the Pokrovsk direction, where the enemy had actively used satellite communications to guide drones, according to a report by the Institute for the Study of War. Analysts note that Ukrainians' effort to block Starlink terminals for Russian forces are likely to affect Russia's attempts to conduct battlefield air isolation. Several Russian military bloggers complained that Russian forces can no longer use the terminals and expressed concern about the consequences that the loss of Starlink capabilities may have on the battlefield. On February 5th, a commander of a brigade of Ukrainian unmanned systems forces reported that Russian forces had recently accumulated a significant number of Starlink terminals, which provided stable communications between units.
The commander stated that Russians had begun integrating Starlink to control drones, but efforts to block Russian terminals will deprive the enemy of the ability to conduct reconnaissance and strike missions, maintain communication between groups, and will also complicate Russia's offensive operations. He noted that recent attacks on Russian terminals have not brought down Russian forces, but have caused them significant losses.
According to RSW, without Starlink terminals, Russian forces will likely be unable to conduct the battlefield isolation campaign at the same pace and to the same depth as in recent weeks. In particular, they recently used Starlink-supported drones for real-time target guidance and to extend the range of unmanned aerial vehicles to strike moving targets such as trains, as well as Ukrainian transport along the Pokrovsk-Pavlograd highway in Dnipropetrovsk region.
Russian forces will likely struggle to maintain this BAI campaign at the same intensity levels in the near term unless Russian forces can find workarounds to the blocks or adapt new technological solutions to replace Starlink.
Russians are trying to legalize the occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, thereby creating conditions for the resumption of electricity production and its connection to the Russian power grid, according to RSW. Acting head of Russia's Federal Service of Environmental, Technological and Nuclear Supervision, Rostechnadzor Upper Don Directorate Andrei Turin visited the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant on February 3rd to discuss key operational and safety issues at the plant. Turin and Rostechnadzor officials focused on the issue of licensing activities at the station. They noted that Rostechnadzor would grant a license to operate power unit number 2 of the ZNPP within the next month.
In June, the same organization issued a license to operate power unit number 1. In addition, the Russian occupying administration of the ZNPP announced the official completion of the station's transition to a standard organizational structure typical for Russian nuclear power plants. Over the past year, ISW analysts have observed several signs that Russia's efforts to restart the ZNPP and connect it to the Russian power grid are nearing completion, as evidenced by Rostechnadzor's license issuance.
About the situation around ZNPP, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been under occupation by Russian troops since March 2022. During this time, Russia has repeatedly attempted to give its control over the facility pseudo-legal status, disregarding the norms of international law. As part of diplomatic efforts, the United States has proposed a joint management option for the Zaporizhzhia NPP involving Ukraine, Russia and the US. At the same time, President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that such an approach is unfair and unacceptable. At the end of December, Ukraine and Russia agreed on a local ceasefire in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant area, which made it possible to begin repairing the damaged power line. Moscow insists that Ukraine and Russia should share the electricity generated by the temporarily occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has rebuked French President Emmanuel Macron for publicly saying he intended to call Russian dictator Vladimir Putin without actually doing so, describing it as pathetic diplomacy, reported by Lavrov in an interview with RT, a Russian government-funded news television network. Lavrov criticized Macron for speaking about plans to talk to the Russian dictator while not having called him.
You know, this is not serious. It is some kind of pathetic diplomacy. If you want to call and discuss something seriously, then call. Putin will always pick up the phone. He will always listen to any proposals. And if it comes to serious proposals, I assure you they will not be left without a serious, concrete, and practical response.
2 weeks earlier, Lavrov described Macron's remarks about plans to speak with Putin as grandstanding for public attention. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that Washington is considering the possibility of tightening sanctions on Russia. According to him, any new restrictions will depend on the progress of peace negotiations, reports Reuters. During a hearing before the Senate Banking Committee, Bessent was asked whether he could commit to taking action against Russia's shadow fleet. He replied that he would take that under consideration and that they would see how the peace negotiations developed. Introducing new sanctions against Russia's shadow fleet is a step that U.S. President Donald Trump has not taken since returning to office in January 2025. In addition to potential new restrictions, Bessent said that the U.S. sanctions imposed by the Trump administration on oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil have helped bring Russia to the negotiating table to end the war. The Treasury Secretary was also asked about Jared Kushner's role in talks with Russia. Bessent said that in his view, the president's son-in-law acts as a special envoy and mediator in these negotiations. About new sanctions on Russia and peace negotiations. In November 2025, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the U.S. had nearly exhausted options for new sanctions against Russia, emphasizing that Washington is now focused on enforcing existing measures. At the same time, Rubio noted that some potential for further action remains with the U.S. European partners. Recently, Bloomberg reported that the U.S. has prepared new restrictions against Russia. However, sources say Washington does not currently intend to implement them. Meanwhile, EU High Representative Kaja Kallas announced that the European Union plans to adopt its 20th sanctions package on February 24th. Separately, Ukraine, the US and Russia held the second round of peace talks in Abu Dhabi to end the war. According to Ukraine's National Security Secretary Rustem Umerov, the discussions focused on implementing a ceasefire. The next meeting is expected in the coming weeks. US President Donald Trump has called for the creation of a new nuclear arms control treaty with Russia as the current New START agreement between the two countries expired on the 5th of February, reported by Trump on his social media platform Truth Social. Trump said the New START agreement had poorly negotiated and moreover had been seriously violated. In his view, instead of extending the current deal, the US should have our nuclear experts work on a new, improved and modernized treaty that can last long into the future. The agreement, formerly known as the New Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, New START, was signed in 2010 to replace the original START Treaty of 1991. New START entered into force on the 5th of February 2011 with an initial duration of 10 years and was extended for a further 5 years in 2021. Under the treaty, the US and Russia committed to reducing the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads to no more than 1,550 for each country. They also agreed to limit the number of warhead delivery systems such as intercontinental ballistic missiles and heavy bombers to a maximum of 700. Trump has previously called for China to be included in any future nuclear agreement. Billions in cash by rail. Russia secretly sent billions of dollars in cash to Iran to support the Iranian regime. Tons of banknotes were transported by trains and ships, the Belgorod reports. According to the newspaper, Russia's state-owned Pромsvязьbank delivered cash shipments totaling about $2.5 billion over 4 months.
Nearly 5 tons of banknotes were sent in 34 consignments after Donald Trump imposed new sanctions on Tehran during his first presidential term. According to the obtained documents, each shipment worth between $57 million and $115 million was sent from Pромsvязьbank in Moscow to the Central Bank of Iran in Tehran.
In this view, Moscow and Tehran bypassed sanctions and traditional financial channels, indicating deeper cooperation between the two countries than previously believed. The first shipment was made on August 13, 2018, 1 week after the United States signed the sanctions order. It consisted of 110 kilograms of cash worth $57.3 million.
The cargo may have been transported by rail to Astrakhan, then by sea across the Caspian Sea to the Iranian port of Amirabad, and then again by rail to Tehran. Trade records provided by the Import Genius Service confirm that tons of cash were delivered directly to the Central Bank of the Islamic Republic. Both financial institutions were asked for comment.
At that time, the Central Bank of Iran was headed by Abdelnasser Hemati, who led the institution during the period of intensified sanctions. According to former US Deputy Special Envoy for Iran, such transfers may have been intended to stabilize the Iranian economy. Experts do not rule out that similar schemes may still be operating, particularly amid Iran's supply of Shahed drones and ballistic missiles to Russia for the war against Ukraine. According to the publication, Hemati was reappointed as head of Iran's central bank last year after his predecessor resigned amid nationwide protests. This increased the likelihood that similar cash transfers between Russia and Iran could be repeated. Yes, speculatively, I mean these new protests are unprecedented and Russia would see the collapse of the current regime as a serious loss, the expert said. She also warned that such payments could continue this year. Previously, Iran has sold Russia missiles and drones worth several $billion over the past few years to help Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin in his war against Ukraine. That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.